All right, Susan, can you see the,
I can see the screen. Can you hear me?
yep, we're good to go.
Although my screen is a little bit cut off. The left side of the PowerPoint is cut off.
All right, let's try this.
Perfect. So welcome everyone. This is our members community meeting. We will be broadcasting the same meeting directly after in French. This is our monthly meeting where we are engaging with our member community. Eric, do you want to go to the next slide, please?
Oh, sorry, I thought I gave you control here. You have control
now. Oh, perfect. Bit of a delay. So this is who we are. My name is Susan. I'm here with Carl, who is leading the French community side, and Eric Poirier. We look after generally the member community as well as communications. If you're not familiar with GoToWebinar, you will notice that when you joined on, you're muted. We do want to encourage communications, and so what we'd like to use is the raise hand option. You'll notice just in the grab tab, if you will, the raised hand option. So particularly for after Eric's presentation, to open up to discussion, you can either write a question in the comment box, or you can raise your hand and we'll turn on your mic for you to speak. And if you would please say your name first before you speak. If you do have any issues with the webinar, just write quickly in the chat window and we'll see what we can do for you. So on today's agenda, we're continuing to look at the mandate topic, and particularly how do we structure BIM adoption and implementation in Canada, and looking at the different mandates that we're seeing around the world. There seem to be more and more articles published that capture what each of these different countries are doing, and Canada is never there. So we'd like this to lead to a discussion for what are the primary areas for a national BIM mandate in Canada. As a quick update, our member community at the moment has over 200 members across the country. We also have three affiliate groups in BC, Calgary, and in Quebec. There is discussion around a couple of more groups around the country to have that broad representation and direct link at the local level. And overall, through all our efforts, whether it's through the member community at large, the education committee, technical advisory, our overall goal is to build a national network of excellence around Canada's built environment, specifically the digital built environment. So putting people in touch and making sure that there's a way for them to connect into this network is really one of our goals. I have to mention there's a bit of a delay on my end. Eric, I think, can you put it back?
Sorry.
Perfect, thanks. Thanks. So as we mentioned in our last meeting, we are dividing our topic areas throughout the year into 3 trimesters. You still have control, Eric, if you want to hit it one more time. The very first trimester here that we're in at the moment is looking at moving towards a national BIM mandate for Canada. May, June, July, we want to look at Open BIM in depth. So I think many people are familiar with IFC or Industry Foundation classes, but Open BIM and open standards in a BIM environment go much further beyond that, and we are starting to see many different use cases and case studies of open standards at work in regular practice that bring benefit to the overall. And lastly, we want to look at the BIM adoption and implementation in Canada overall. Where are we at? What can we do for next steps? So specifically focusing on a national mandate for Canada. This is a core of our roadmap that's been developed. Again, this roadmap is available on the Building Smart Canada website. It's a roadmap for all of the AECOO industry, not necessarily under the assumption that our chapter will execute on all of the tasks within the roadmap, but really to set the stage for what are the pieces we need to put in place overall across this entire network of excellence in order to achieve a positive outcome of getting a national mandate. So are we ready? How do we structure this? What else has been done? So the question of, are we ready? We did a couple of presentations between the three of us over the past year, and we asked the same questions each time. So should there be a government mandate to use open standards for BIM on projects? In Montreal, the response was 94% yes. In Vancouver, the next one's there, please. Oh, you gave me control. This was, sorry, in Vancouver, it was a very similar, plus 95% result. This is most recently from a CanBIM event. Do you think Canada should follow in the footsteps of the UK and German major projects action plan for BIM and 3D on public infrastructure? Obviously, it's almost unanimous. I think the consensus is pretty clear. And then, should it be all of government? Should it be specifically the feds, the provinces, the municipalities? Nobody at all? At the end of the day, through all of the different surveys we've done to date, 99% say yes, all levels of government. So I think that speaks for itself. And the question of how do we structure it? Well, fortunately, there's been quite a bit of work done here in Canada, and I'll turn it over to Eric now to present work that himself and his colleagues have done through ETS and UBC.
All right, thanks, Susan. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here, or actually good afternoon. So we did do some work in this area last year around just looking at what's happening around the world. This was a mandate that we did with the Société Québécoise des Infrastructures, and just to look at how are other countries, moving towards BIM and transitioning, and how are they structuring it. So this is a paper that's freely available. We'll be able to send a link out if you want it. One of the first things we sort of looked at is that there's an international consensus around there's a need to have a strategic reform of the construction industry. We looked at the UK, that constructing excellence, the Latham report, the Egan report in the 90s, the Hong Kong, the U.S. and a lot of countries had this introspection. Something that is similar. I mentioned this last month. So we asked two fundamental questions. So, how can the Canadian AECO industry learn from other countries' experience in their transition, and how do we develop a comprehensive reform strategy? And so we're really looking at how do we overhaul the industry. And one of the things is that a key that a BIM mandate is part of that, and just moving towards better practices. Based on this work that was done in Hong Kong in 2010, they had highlighted 7 areas or 7 key drivers for all these countries and how they developed their reform strategy for their construction industry. First is the public sector is a key driver. The second one is a clear government policy and a clear governmental policy to move towards a better construction industry, looking at BIM standards and guidelines, clear information exchange requirements, designated organizations, so leaders, reporting and promoting BIM, and then also having some BIM research programs that really can get the country moving along. So in terms of the public sector, in the international level, we recognize that there was the power of the public sector as a key actor in the reform of the AECO industry. If you know, a quick calculation in Quebec, and I did do the calculation across the country, it's about 70 to 80% of projects are procured with public money. So that's at all levels, either federal, provincial, or municipal, with the provincial level in Quebec being 30% and the municipal being 40%. There was a specific government department that led the initiative. So if we look at, in the US, there's the GSA. If we look at the UK, the Cabinet Office had implemented specific departments. So there was a clear leader within the government that really led the effort, and a lot of investments. In Canada, one of the things that we highlighted, and we highlighted this last month, is the complexity of the multi-layered governmental context. It's it's a federated country, so and that's something we have to contend with. There is a need for a national initiative, but that national initiative has to trickle down to provincial and municipal levels. And there's a national framework for innovative project delivery adapted at all levels of government. So how can we make something that's agile and that's robust enough that it can be used by all these different levels of government without having to be changed or reformatted every time? Just looking in terms of investments from the public sector, we look at these 5 countries. The United Kingdom, over 5 years, they spent $7 million worth Canadian in just implementing the BIM task group and developing their BIM program. In Finland, Tekis, which is a research organization, they spent in 4 years, they had a $31 million Canadian research program just on BIM and the digital built environment. In Norway, Statsbygg, they spent almost another $31 million worth of R&D, both public and private sector funding. In Singapore, this was actually, Singapore is a very good example of the public money being spent directly on organizations, where up to 50% of the cost associated to the BIM adoption was covered by the government. And in France, they've just committed 20 million euro to a national roadmap for digital technologies in the construction industry. So the key word here is invest. In terms of government policy, I updated this map this timeline that we showed last month to add Spain and Germany, but unfortunately, we can't add Canada yet. What we've seen across Canada is that there's no formal policy mandating BIM, and I think that's clear, and everybody knows that. But there are separate initiatives that are coming to light, and so there's the DND's and DCC's initiative around space management and open BIM and GIS. Alberta Infrastructure has piloted the Royal Alberta Museum project, and they're looking at BIM for FM. The Société Québécoise des Infrastructures look at several small pilot projects, and are now moving towards a provincial mandate. And the government of Saskatchewan, with the Moose Jaw Hospital, which is a very good lesson learned and a very good benchmark in terms of public projects being delivered into integrated project delivery and using building information modeling. But these policies remain fragmented. So how do we unify these policies to make sure that standards are not replicated at each either municipal or provincial levels to sort of circumvent what the US is going through with having states and national bodies and even universities and municipalities having their own BIM guidelines and standards. This is quite an old map of the different standards around the world, but one of the key issues here is that we need BIM standards and guidelines are very important to make the industry move forward. And I have to repeat, having a BIM standard is a key element here. And when we're talking about a BIM standard, we'll be discussing later on in a subsequent month what a standard would look like. We're not talking about we have to move away from the idea of a CAD standard in terms of drawing conventions and so forth towards a data standard, and that's something that's really important. We have to shift our thinking. So we'll discuss that in the upcoming months. So there is a presence of many different standards, and there's a problem of broadcasting a consistent message. One of the things in developing the practice manual, we've highlighted about 20 different roles and responsibilities associated to just the BIM coordinator, and it means different things across different countries. So how do we unify that and make sure that we're being consistent? One of the advantages of having access to all these standards is that we can actually leverage these lessons learned and really let the cream rise and get the best of these standards. And so that's a really important thing. One of the things is looking at who's responsible for what, and this is still in movement, and I think we're going to reach a consensus about what organization does what, and right now it's sort of aligning that IBC, the Institute for BIM in Canada, is looking at the toolkits, the practice manual, the contract language documents, Building Smart looking at the strategy and standards, and CanBIM really looking at the business processes and the guidelines mentioned here, the AEC CanBIM protocol that was released a couple of years ago. So the fourth element is the clear information requirements and open standards. If we looked at the international, there was an international consensus that exchange standards and open standards is very important. IFC, and all the open BIM framework is really something that is key in developing either the standards and really pushing a mandate. To this effect, a joint statement was signed by the GSA, Senate Properties in Finland, Statsbygg in Norway, and Denmark to really support open BIM in government. So in Canada, we have to reconfigure how these information exchanges and open standards are done. There also needs requirements for the reuse of information over the product lifecycle. So the fifth one is looking at designated organizations for business implementation and promotion. I apologize, my daughter is freaking out in the background. All right. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so designated organizations for BIM implementation and promotion. We look at, should it be a top-down or a bottom-up approach? What we're looking at more and more is this middle-out approach, and looking at the BIM task group is an example of this. The BCA is an example of this. We're looking at Building Smart, CanBIM, and IBC as an example of this for Canada. And lastly, we're looking at BIM research programs. At the international level, we looked at a lot of investments in research and development, innovation programs, technology development, and transition support. In Canada, we're looking at involving different research groups, universities, and organizations. A lot, again, research is similar to the rest of the elements, is that it's fragmented across provinces, and how is money attributed, and where does money go for research, and how do we make a coherent research agenda? We really need to redefine professional curricula to fit the new context of integrated approaches. That's one of the things that is key in transitioning, is having, and we touched upon that last month, about having a core curriculum, core learning outcomes. This is what you need to know to move forward. So at the end of this research project, what we sort of concluded was that the innovative approaches improves the performance and value generated. That's something that is key. We understand that we need to transition, and I think that's a given. What we did learn is that governments around the world, they're driving the reform. So as much as we'd like industry to take the lead, where there's been a lot of success, there has been a heavy involvement of government bodies. We can, as you know, in Canada, we can rely on international efforts to inform our initiatives, and I think this notion of single vision, again, not a unified, not a homogenous vision, but a really something that we're moving in the same direction. The roadmap being sort of the linchpin to that vision. So the next couple of slides, we'll just go through in depth into the different initiatives around the world, just so we understand where we are at compared to those, and how we can take the best practices and the lessons learned from those different countries. What we looked at was really looking at what was the core effort here, and what was the driving force behind these reconfigurations and this transformation. So the USA was really based on, they wanted to improve the performance. You see that issue of stagnating productivity that Paul Tischolt's study, stagnating productivity in the construction industry compared to non-farm industries. That was a huge driver. They wanted to improve the performance of their industry. In the UK, they looked at a total reconfiguration of practices around, constructing excellence, Procure 21, looking at partnering, alliancing, different and supply chain integration. So different approaches to streamline their construction industry, to make it much more performant. Looking at the Scandinavian countries, a lot of it was driven by technological advancements and innovation. If you look at, IFC and Open BIM, that it really originated in the Scandinavian countries. Of course, in the US also with the IAI, but the Scandinavian countries were really key to driving this. If we look at Singapore, Korea, and the Asian markets, there was a portion of that were really looking to transform their industry from a really craft-based, more dirty industry to a leading-edge, highly technological industry. So again, I show this timeline, and we'll be going through these different countries and what they've done across four key elements. So if we start with the US, looking at the governance, really looking at the GSA, which started to mandate BIM in 2007 for spatial validation. We looked at the military construction, of which the US Army Corps of Engineers is part. They started mandating BIM in 2008, and then looking at states like Georgia, Ohio, Minnesota, and Texas, and Wisconsin, which started as early as 2009 to mandate BIM on their projects. If we look at organisms and programs that promoted the BIM adoption and implementation, we look, of course, at the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, the AGC, the Association of General Contractors and American General Contractors, and the Building Smart Alliance, which all developed programs to support BIM adoption and implementation. We then looked also at the different guidelines and standards, and so actually trying to map the guidelines and standards in the U.S. is quite a challenge, because there's we've looked at 108, and I think, and Susan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, there's probably more than that in there that have been developed on the BIM Guides wiki, but we're looking at really three core guides, which is the NBIMS, so the National BIM Standard, the Penn State BIM PXP guides, and the AIA BIM Appendix, as well as the consensus docs for the contractual appendix. In terms of research, we looked at there's four key. There are more, but four national bodies looking at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the National Institute of Building Science, the Construction Industry Institute, and the Computer Integrated Construction Research Group, which is at Penn State. So as I said, spatial BIM mandated on all GSA projects since 2008, and BIM on all USACE projects since 2008. The United Kingdom, looking at the Cabinet Office, as I said, there was a strong leadership from that's really a top-down approach. The Cabinet Office mandating BIM, the Department for Business Innovation and Skills, BIS, who really focused on how do we roll this out. Since the early 90s, a lot of programs in the UK to reform the industry. So looking at the Strategic Forum and Constructing Excellence. The BIM Task Group, which I mentioned, $7 million worth of funding over 5 years to really develop and push the level 2 mandate. And now the Strategic Forum has, my understanding is, has transitioned into Digital Build Britain, which is a new initiative aimed at digital data in the construction industry. In terms of guidelines and standards, they've really focused on their different standards, and we'll go through these a bit later on, but the level 2 BIM suites of documents consists of a series of standards that are referenced. And so when you're mandating BIM and when you're moving towards BIM, you're looking at these, having to deliver these to these different standards. So level 2 BIM project mandated on all, level 2 BIM mandated on all public projects by April 2016. One of the key things, and what I like about the UK, is their strategic approach to their reform, really, targeting 4 core elements: the lower costs, faster delivery, lower carbon emissions, and improvement in exports. And that was really foundational to why they wanted to transition, and that was key part of the strategy. And I think that this is a key element that Canada has to look at in informing a move towards a BIM mandate. In Finland, government was supported by Senate Properties. Their driver was really social responsibility, so sustainability was a key element in choosing to reform their industry. Organisms and programs, we had 3: TECIS, VTT, and RIM-OI. So these are really key organisms that are fronting the transition. There's also the Scandinavian Building Smart International chapter. Looking at the common BIM's requirements that were developed, and these are freely available again, so that's a good benchmark. In terms of research, I had mentioned that there was $31 million worth of research that was headed by TECIS and RIM-OI. They also, they started early on researching BIM and trying to develop technological approaches and solutions with these 2 major research programs from 1997 to 2007, and which has continued on through TECIS and RIM-OI. So IFC deliverables on all public projects since October 1st, 2007. So that's really, Finland was one of the first to really look at mandating and having a strong public mandate for open BIM and IFC deliverables. Norway is another one of another key leader in terms of the governments. We're looking at StatsBig, which is again their infrastructure, their public body of infrastructure, looking at open BIM required in all projects from 2010 on. Building Smart Norway, Client Forum, so 8 large public client bodies, open BIM required on all projects in 2016. So they've really ramped up how they've asked for this. And so with this Client Forum, looking at healthcare providers, looking at large infrastructure and large transport bodies. And this is led by the Building Smart chapter. So Building Smart chapter in Norway has a very strong representation. In terms of organisms and programs, again, Building Smart Norway is very strong, a lot of funding, and they're really implementing the International Frameworks Dictionary and Building Smart Data Dictionary. They've actually developed a procurement. If you look at the video on Open BIM, that was produced by Building Smart Norway, and they've produced, they actually developed a sort of integrated procurement approach through open standards. In terms of standards and guidelines, there are the StatsBig BIM guidelines, and also the Norwegian Home Builders Association has developed its own guidelines. And also a lot of research, of course, being funded by the Norwegian government. Norway signed the Joint Statement of Intention to support BIM with open standards in 2008, along with the GSA, the Finnish government, and the Danish government. In Denmark, again, 3 core client groups or owner groups, public owner groups, that really pushed the development of BIM. They have, in terms of organisms, they have a specific organism that's really leading the digital construction initiative, which is the BIPS. They have a standard now that has been developed for for all their projects, and three universities really looking into BIM and technological solutions. They've mandated BIM on all projects for projects that are more than 5.5 million euros since 2007, and are looking to transition that in the near future. France, the government, so they've put in place, the French government has put in place BIM France, which is sort of an organization that really is leading the effort. They also have a French chapter of Building Smart, which is Media Construct, with which we're developing good relationships with. They really had two programs, the Mission Numérique du Bâtiment, which was sort of the overarching program from which the Plan de Transition Numérique dans le Bâtiment took place. So this is really their roadmap of how to transition to a digital and more digital construction industry. One of the guidelines that they've developed is this French norm. And in terms of research, looking at the CSTB as being a key driver in developing and in performing research in this area. Their key mandate will be BIM will be mandated on all public projects that are over 2,000 square meters by 2017. So they do have a timeline. Germany. So this in Germany we're hoping to get a speaker from Germany to actually speak at one of our meetings, but right now it's being led by the Minister of Transport and Digital Infrastructure. There is a Building Smart German-speaking chapter in terms of organisms that lead the effort. They do have a BIM guide in Germany, and they also have a standards branch, but there's nothing really developed in terms of BIM standards right now. What's sort of important is that BIM will be mandated on all transportation projects by 2020, and that was announced recently. But I think Germany is going through sort of the growing pains that we are in Canada, is having where does the governance come from, and who's really leading this effort. Spain is another one that recently announced the mandate. So they really looked at the suggested BIM mandate on all public projects by 2018 or 2019, depending on which public body. But this again is led by the Ministry of Infrastructure, who set up a BIM steering committee, and Building Smart Spain is really invested in the effort through this. In the Barcelona and Catalogne region, they have an institute that's really looking at BIM and developing this. If we move to Asia, looking at Singapore, so Singapore really in 1999 started to look at how they could transform their industry. They've mandated BIM on all public projects that are bigger than 5,000 square meters since 2015. Basically, they've developed a lot of organisms and developed a lot of programs. And I think the two of those is Reinventing Construction, C21, and Construction and Real Estate Network, which was developed in 1995, and really is key in this digital environment for Singapore. They also have the Center for Construction IT, and Building Smart Singapore is heavily involved. They have developed the Singapore BIM Guide, which is freely available, and also another good resource. Hong Kong, sort of the same situation as Singapore, wanted to transition from a dirty and unproductive and industry to a clean one in 2000. They did an introspection and developed the Construction Industry Council and the Construction Industry Review Committee. They've developed and the effort is really being led by the Hong Kong Housing Authority and they're going to mandate BIM. They've been mandating BIM since 2015. South Korea is actually a really interesting case, because they've sort of been going at it very hard, and have developed a lot of good research programs and standards and guidelines, and have really led the transformation as an industry. Building Smart Korea has 22 universities associated to it, 192 enterprises, and 20 associations. So it's really the body that's driving the transition in Korea. And in terms of the government, it's the public procurement services are the ones that are leading the effort with their BIM roadmap. So BIM mandated on all public projects since January 1st, 2016. So it's a very recent mandate, but I think it was very well set up with, and you can see the different guides that have been developed and so forth. Australia is the last one. So Australia is interesting because in the 2010, early 2009, 2010, there was a strong push to really look at this and mandate BIM from a government perspective, and there was a lot of money spent on developing research programs and so forth. And a lot of people were involved, and they developed a national BIM initiative. And develop guidelines and so forth. But I think, and this will confirm with another speaker from Australia, but the mandate hasn't been really developed yet. And so there was a projected mandate by 2016 and 2012, but nothing has really happened, but that we need to confirm. So I'll give it back to Susan. And so this is a quick overview. The slides will be available. And if you have any questions, of course, don't hesitate. I'll hand it back over to Susan to sort of look at what does the mandate entail for Canada, and just sort of start developing how should we develop this.
Thanks, Eric. I guess we'll take some questions in a few minutes if you want to prepare your questions. One thing I can mention is that was an excellent overview of all the different countries, and still about another 6 to 10 countries are making significant moves. If they haven't already, if you're not already familiar, the Netherlands has been advanced for quite a long time. Sweden as well. China is really pulling its weight recently. There's a lot of action, tangible action, coming out of Ireland, out of Qatar, out of Dubai. We know that with Australia, New Zealand has done quite well in publishing some national documents. And now, through colleagues and other sources, South Africa, Egypt, Israel, again, I almost have the drive to ask all of these different connections, can you write a letter, Dear Canada, why are we struggling to get through this mandate aspect and get a real leadership going in this area, as Eric has referenced. Let's see, do I have control?
You now have control.
So I'm sure everyone is familiar with the argument of trying to improve performance. There's a lot of conversation around what does that really mean. Certainly the famous graph of decreasing productivity in the US compared to our industry, compared to all other industries. It is a bit of a different situation here in Canada, but overall, again, the debate relates, are we simply improving performance, meaning being able to do the same tasks better or more efficiently, or are we trying to reach a new level of generation of value, of performance through completely reforming the industry in terms of how it does business? How does it go through the transactions required, the information exchanges required to deliver the best value possible and come out with the best product at the end of the day? One example from a different industry you can see on the screen here has to do with the global warming topic. So again, it captures Canada's challenges as far as being a federalist system, uh, in the sense of trying to corral these widely different political players towards a single goal or a single vision. So it is a common challenge we have. We also have many other strengths that we're not making obvious at the moment, but this is certainly a challenge for us in pursuit of this. So what does a mandate entail? It entails both the means and methods and delivering outcomes. So a lot of discussion happens around the very technical side, which may or may not be necessary for the end user to be privy to. There's a lot of discussion around, well, the owner needs to require it, they need to provide their standards, their guidelines, we need everything, you know, very prescriptive, and there's a lot of debate around that. Eric, do you want to mention anything on this particularly?
Well, I guess I mean what we're trying to look at is in developing a mandate, and there's a lot of sort of the pushback we get from when we say a mandate is should the government really tell us what to do and how to deliver projects? And I think that's the question here is that it's not really what we're looking for. Should we be mandating means and methods? Should we be mandating outcomes? I think that's something we need to look at and really how do we formulate language and how do we formulate policy around these two elements? If we want to improve, performance, there is the performance of how we do things, but there's also the performance of the outcome at the end. So I think that's one of the things is just looking at highlighting areas of where do we need to really or how do we start formulating this language? And it is a journey, but we need to start somewhere.
Yeah, thank you. And carrying through translating between standards and strategy, particularly this is the Building Smart chapter. It's been identified that our strengths, some of our strengths are under the auspices of setting up standards, of being able to adopt standards that are coming out from other countries, and also we represent Canada at the ISO standardization level, and how we can action on a strategy that drives real outcomes for the industry to bite on, to chew on. This is the famous wedge diagram from the UK. They're very clear. They've been very clear with their vision of the different levels. Currently, the mandate is for BIM level 2. You can see where the line in the sand is here. BIM level 2 being collaborative working on a common data environment. This is the information aspect within the standards that are currently published. We have the representation of the geometry, the management of this information, as well as specific data sets or data schema, data model, data dictionary, data processes. Here in Canada, I think we're all familiar, and it's logical that there are stronger, more provinces that are more inclined to be leaders because of the numbers, because of the amount of money that they deal with. In our affiliate program, currently we have affiliates in British Columbia, in Alberta, and in Quebec, and we're on the table for a group in Ontario and a group out east in Halifax. And those really are the typical heavy lifters where we need our leadership to step up. I don't have any more on this slide, Eric, unless you want to add in.
No, I guess it's in developing this mandate is understanding who's doing what and where is it happening, and I think you covered it very well.
Yeah. I will actually make a point on the back here. One, in my experience through Building Smart International and the ISO world, getting to know the different international players, just who and how are getting things done. We do have an advantage in Canada in that we may be a very large country geographically and very federated between the different regions and provinces. However, we have a very small world. We have a small population, and the majority of people that are experts in this area are all on a similar page, are all in collaboration, or know of each other well enough that it becomes a very small world, and that's going to be to our advantage, because as we're doing here at Building Smart and working with the IBC, working with CanBIM, working with our affiliates, we are a small world, a small group of experts that will be our strength if we can continue to make the right connections at the 3 different levels of government to push forward for not just a clear mandate, but clear investment dollars, clear metric targets for outcomes. Certainly there's a lot of funding coming up on the infrastructure side. Back to our roadmap, we have laid out target dates which are more, they're not hard lines by any means. Certainly we need to think about timing and dates and have some goals, but the dates are slightly arbitrary and are there based on other international examples. So for 2017, we've already been in the past, since 2014, we've already been working on a number of the items here, and really trying to draw in other groups to work on many of these items with us. So really to flesh out and build on this network of excellence. So if we want to understand what does a mandate entail, who, what, where, when, I really recommend that you go and take a harder look at this roadmap and see where you feel you fit in, or if we can make changes for the better to this roadmap that would help industry further along. So we'll open it up for discussion. We're looking at your feedback on what are the priority areas for a national BIM mandate in Canada. We do have a few poll questions. I'm not sure when they're coming up.
Well, so I do have one hand raised, and so I have two questions here actually came through. So too many acronyms have been used. So yes, I apologize for that. It is our world is just full of acronyms. I guess we'll try to maybe do a lexicon or provide a lexicon of all the acronyms that we've used, and I'll put that in the shared folder, which you'll have access to, which you should have access to, and the link is in the newsletter. Another question from here from so Graham Beveridge, I'll actually open up the floor to you. Because you said you'd like to provide us with a brief position with regards to the federal government. So I'll give me 2 seconds. I'll open up to you. So Graham, you've been you're unmuted and you can go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Good. Okay, so I'm Graham Beveridge and I'm head of geomatics group for Parliamentary Precinct in the National Capital Area for the federal government, and it's under PSBC, which is formerly Public Works. I can speak on behalf of PPB's position at the moment. I can't really give a departmental overview because I'm not mandated to do so at this point. But the reality is that in PPB, I've really been pushing BIM and trying to put together some kind of standards with lots of other collaborations with people trying to help me out with that. And the reality is that we have a lot of construction going on, as you well know, probably, with the Hill renovations, and I've been really pushing the fact that they should be using BIM for that purpose. It's been a real struggle trying to get people to buy in on it. We initiated that that whole process back in 2008, or even 2006, 2008, with the renovation of the Bank of Montreal project, and we only took it to a certain level because we had a lot of apprehension from the consultants at that point about getting themselves involved in that technology and training and all that standard stuff that's gone along with implementing BIM over the years. I can honestly say though now I'm really starting to have a move forward with it. I got a lot more buy-in from the upper hierarchy structures in our branch, and we're now looking at even potentially doing campus-wide BIMing for the precinct. So to me, that's a huge achievement. It's come a long way, and when it comes though to a standard, a BIM standard from the Public Works or the new PSPC acronym perspective, I personally don't, like I said, I don't have the mandate to really push that mandate of a BIM standard federally or nationally. I am pushing it internally to be done, but I'm getting a lot of apprehension from the rest of the government on that at the moment, only because they don't. I would only hope that they could see presentations like this, because this is really what they get driven home to them, is how we're sitting basically twiddling our thumbs with this, and nobody's moving on it. Nobody's willing to put the financing in place to fund a BIM standard nationally. And so I'm trying to push it. That's all I can really say to that, is I'm trying to push it. And I hope that there's others from PSPC sitting listening to this, or listening to the presentations, to get a good idea of where we're actually sitting with it. I also wanted to point out that when it came to the development of a national BIM standard, and we started out back in the late 2000s, we had met with industry, and industry made that very clear, at least at that point, made it very clear to us in the federal government that we were not to push it. We were to walk hand in hand with it, but we were not to push it. And so I really don't, it's kind of confusing. I'm sure the rest of the government from a headquarters or corporate perspective is probably also looking at that going, well, they didn't want us to push it, and now they're telling us to lead it. So which one is it? And I think there's going to be confusion there. We really have to make a defined pathway as to what role you want the federal government to take in this, and then try to sell that to them.
Thank you very much, Graham. That was, I mean, it's a great insight. And those last comments, I think, yeah, not to not send a contradictory message to the different levels of government. And Susan, I don't know if you have anything to add. I am aware we are 5 minutes off the hour, and it'd be great. We mismanaged our time. This that's partly my fault. But just to speak to that, Graham, I think we sort of, what we want to see is sort of a consistent message, and we're really aiming towards that. You know, Building Smart is a consistent message and consistent representation. This is what we need from our different bodies, and I totally agree. And if you look towards Quebec, they're actually doing it well in the fact that they are doing it hand in hand, where they have multi-sectoral tables where they're discussing both the public body and the industry are discussing how this mandate should happen and how it should be developed, and that we're trying to diffuse sort of the lessons learned and how to go about doing that, and how should we move towards that. I think it's just putting the stepping stones in place, and you know, getting there, just taking baby steps of what it would look like and how should we do it.
I can add one more comment, Eric. I just wanted to point out also that I am getting headway corporately or departmentally from an FM perspective. I'm getting a lot of interest departmentally for using BIM for FM. So I'm trying to also use that route in getting it more exposed, at least.
Well, that's where the means and methods versus the outcomes discussion is around. Is if you're mandating BIM for construction and asking them to do 4D and 3D clash detection and all that, you're mandating means and methods. Whereas if you're doing it for FM, you're asking for a deliverable and a clear outcome of the BIM process from which you're going to use downstream. But I mean, definitely, it'd be great to take this discussion offline, and if anybody else has any comments. Unfortunately, we are 4 minutes off the hour, so Susan, I'll let you conclude. We didn't have time to refer poll questions. We might start with those next month and just go on that, because I like the discussion where we're going.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. We'll save the poll questions for the beginning of the next meeting. It looks like we will have Mr. Bilal Sukar from Australia to be able to speak with us next time. It won't be at the same time slot just because of the time zone difference. But he and some of his colleagues are doing quite a lot of work on a macro level policy focus. What are commonalities in BIM policy development? So at the government mandate level. And we're asking him, he's agreed to present some of his findings of the different countries so that we can tangibly action ourselves into a mandate, or to respond, Graham, to better define what role the federal government should take. So thank you to everyone for joining us today. We will reconvene again in a month. We would love to hear from you between now and then. If you want to shoot us an email, if you want to find us on Twitter, if you want to give us a call, all of our information is available through our buildingsmartcanada.ca website. So thanks very much. Have a good day.